David Marples is a professor of Russian and East European history at the University of Alberta. He joins me now from Edmonton. Professor, as we just saw in that news story there, we have seen opposition in Russia to the attacks in Ukraine, despite great risk for people being arrested and possibly even worse. Do you see that opposition growing the longer that this goes on?
Yeah, I think the whole point for Putin is to finish this war quickly and occupy the major city, Kiev and Kharkiv, and form a new government in Ukraine. And the longer this takes, the more difficult it's going to be for Putin and the leaders of Russia. And Ukraine has resisted, I think, far more strongly than was anticipated. Also, the performance of the Russian ground army has been less efficient than was anticipated. So the attacks have slowed down. It's taking much longer. The one city that they seem to have captured is Kherson in the south, which is very close to the border with Crimea, and where this massive force was able to move in there and take over the city. But elsewhere, I think Ukrainian forces have defended very strongly, and they'll continue to do so in the days ahead.
As these attacks intensify, we are seeing more sanctions and more bans on Russian products. How isolated is that potentially making Putin? And do you think that will have an effect? Or do you think it's just harming the people of Russia, many of whom we know don't support a war with Ukraine?
Well, I think that's the problem with sanctions anyway, that they're going to hit all sectors of Russian society, including the poorest strata. Ultimately, though, I think they will also hit the richer groups, the oligarchs. And the oligarchs and people who are, let's say, more wealthy in Russia are also the same people who have access to foreign sources of information and can see different sides to this war. Because I think for the average Russian outside Moscow, maybe living in a village or town, they're only going to hear state propaganda. And this state propaganda says that there's a neo-Nazi regime in Ukraine, and this is a special operation to remove it from power. But as it goes on longer, I think once the oligarchs and the richer groups start to feel the pain, there'll be more pressure on the Russian government to come up with some kind of solution. And I think the sanctions will take effect more and more. Within about a month, they should be hitting very strongly. So again, it's a question of how long Ukraine's forces can hold out. And this war has become much more indiscriminate, in my view, in the last 48 hours or so. You're seeing cluster bombs, you're seeing indiscriminate attacks on populated buildings, deaths of civilians in large numbers. And this is no longer a special operation to hit military targets or, let's say, power sources in Ukraine. This is a campaign that's directed against the people of Ukraine as much as the government of Ukraine. So it's become much wider than was initially stated by the Russian leadership.
We have another round of peace talks on Thursday, but there just seems to be little, if any, common ground between the two sides. What are your expectations? Do you think that these peace talks will be able to achieve anything?
I doubt it. And I'm surprised, really, that people are still talking to Vladimir Putin, because there's been no point so far in these conversations, and he's made it quite clear from the beginning that he's going to make no concessions. I think what we're really looking for now is some kind of intermediary in this war situation, some power that could play a role of an intermediary, or else some other solution, perhaps through the UN. But I don't see any progress being made between the two sides that are fighting the war, because there's nothing to argue about. The Russian forces have come into Ukraine. They made it clear they want to get rid of the government. And in turn, the Ukrainian people are solidly behind their president. I saw a poll today that suggested Zelensky's support now is about 93%. And yet, before the war started, it was less than 30%. This seems to me to indicate that the Ukrainians are quite unified in their response to this war. And that is not good news for Russia, not good news for President Putin, at least. So maybe there will be a groundswell of opposition in Russia, but I think what may turn the course of the war are either the effects of sanctions or the failure of the operation, which is possible.
All right, and we'll leave it there. Professor David Marples joining us from Edmonton. Thank you.